All right, 9.4. In this section, I want to cover the accessory organs and the regulation of secretions. So there are a couple of accessory organs to the digestive system that aid in while the food doesn't necessarily pass through them directly, they do play a very important part of the digestive system, and I do want to go over them and give them credit for the role they play in the breakdown and absorption of our food. Starting with the pancreas, we did mention it quite a bit in the previous section when we talked about all of the different enzymes that are responsible for the breakdown of our food. So the pancreas is going to be located just behind the stomach. Most of the pancreatic cells produce pancreatic juice. The pancreatic juice is going to enter the duodenum via the pancreatic duct. This is going to contain sodium bicarbonate and digestive enzymes. It's also considered an endocrine gland. It secretes the hormone insulin when the blood glucose levels rise. Type 1 diabetes is caused by not producing enough insulin. Normally, this is diagnosed pretty early on in childhood, but it can be developed a little bit later in life. Type 2 diabetes is when the body's cells are insulin resistant. So even though the pancreas is producing insulin, the body's cells are not responding to it. Normally, this occurs later in adulthood, but there are several risk factors that can increase the likelihood that you'll develop type 2 diabetes, things like obesity, inactivity, or a family history of type 2 diabetes. So here's the location of the pancreas. Like I said, it's located just behind the stomach, but it does contain ducts that are going to enter and secrete pancreatic juice into the duodenum, the upper portion of the small intestine. The liver is also a very important accessory structure in the digestive system. It is the largest gland in the body, and it lies mainly in the upper right abdominal cavity, just under the diaphragm. It does contain several lobules, which are just the structural and functional units of the liver. The hepatic portal vein brings blood to the liver from the GI tract. And so this is how it plays a role in digestion, is that the blood goes from the GI tract to the liver. The lobules will filter the blood and remove any poisonous substances before returning it to your bloodstream. It's also going to store vitamins and play an important role in maintaining blood glucose levels. So just like the pancreas secretes insulin when the blood sugar gets too high, this is going to store glucose as glycogen. When the blood sugar or blood glucose is low, it's going to release glucose by breaking down that glycogen. And this is how you can kind of get through fast and feast times. So if you were only able to absorb sugar or maintain glucose in the bloodstream during your eating or during your meal times, you would need to be constantly feeding. But because your body can store energy, can store carbohydrates in the form of glycogen, you can go from meal to meal and survive off of the glycogen that's being stored and produced by your liver. So it can convert the glycerol and amino acids into glucose, which can then be used as cellular fuel for our bodies. As the amino acids are converted to glucose, urea is going to be formed. This is going to need to be filtered out of the bloodstream and taken to the kidneys. It's also going to produce plasma proteins, regulate blood cholesterol levels, produce bile, which contains bile salts, water, cholesterol, and bicarbonate ions, and it's going to contain bilirubin. Bilirubin is a green pigment formed from the breakdown of hemoglobin. So here's just a table that kind of goes through some of the functions of the liver. Destroys old red blood cells, excretes bilirubin. That's the breakdown product of the hemoglobin in bile. Detoxifies the blood by removing it and metabolizing poisonous substances. Storing iron. And the water-soluble vitamin B12 and the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. It's going to be responsible for making plasma proteins, storing glucose as glycogen, producing urea after breaking down amino acids, and help regulating blood cholesterol levels, converting some into bile salts. Next up is the gallbladder. The gallbladder is going to be a small pear-shaped organ just below the liver. It's going to be responsible for storing that bile that was produced. The Gallstones are a homeostatic imbalance associated with the gallbladder. These are sort of made out of like a stone-like material, calcium carbonates that sort of crystallize inside of the gallbladder. Can be very painful to pass. We are going to mention a few homeostatic imbalances associated with the liver. Hepatitis and cirrhosis, both of which are liver diseases that can cause bile pigments to leak into the blood, which can cause jaundice, that yellowish tint in the whites of the eyes and the skin. Hepatitis is an inflammation of the liver, and it has a couple of different forms. Hepatitis A is usually acquired from sewage-contaminated drinking water and food. Hepatitis B usually comes from sexual contact, but it can come from blood transfusions or contaminated needles. Much more contagious than AIDS virus and is spread in the very same way. There are vaccines available for hepatitis A and B that can help sort of stem the spread of those two disorders. Hepatitis C is usually acquired by infected blood. It can lead to chronic hepatitis, liver cancer, and death. Cirrhosis is a chronic disease. First, the liver becomes fatty and then filled with fibrous scar tissue. It's often seen in alcoholics due to malnutrition and the excessive alcohol that the liver is forced to break down and metabolize. The liver can regenerate and recover if the rate of regeneration exceeds the rate of damage. However, during liver failure, there may not be enough time to let the liver heal, so a liver transplantation will be necessary. So the last thing we're going to talk about is the regulation of those digestive secretions. We talked about all of the different accessory organs that are responsible for creating those secretions, but now we're going to talk about the regulation of it. So secretion of the digestive juices is going to be controlled by the nervous system as well as by digestive hormones. So when you look at or smell food, the parasympathetic nervous system is going to stimulate gastric secretion. So this is why your stomach starts to rumble when you smell good food. It's because your stomach is gearing up, getting ready to start digesting and breaking down that food. A meal that's really rich in protein can cause the stomach to produce the hormone gastrin, which is going to increase the secretory activity of the gastric glands. Secretin is secreted by the duodenum. Its release is stimulated by the hydrochloric acid that's present in chyme. So once that enters the duodenum, we're going to start releasing secretin. Cholecystokinin is released by the duodenum when proteins and fats are present. It causes the liver to increase the production of bile, and it causes the gallbladder to contract and release that stored bile into the duodenum. These hormones are going to increase the production of pancreatic juice from the pancreas into the duodenum. All right, so you should be able to name and describe the functions of the three main accessory organs that assist with the digestive process. You should be able to also discuss what would occur if each of the accessory organs of digestion did not function properly. If you know what their role is, you should know what could happen to the body if they don't fulfill their role. You should also be able to detail why the regulation of digestive secretions is important to the overall process of digestion and what would occur without the regulation of those digestive secretions.